Most would think that as you start to become more and more successful, affluent, charismatic, attractive, that it would be easier and easier to build relationships. And there's an element of that that's true. There's definitely going to be more people who are attracted to you on a surface level, the more you level up in life. But in my experience, I've found that the more I've leveled up, the more difficult it's been to make deep and authentic connections and make true friends who want to be there for you and that you can be there for them. So I thought that I would sit down and I would honestly share about my experiences and share some learnings that I've had along the way so that you might be able to relate, and together we can navigate this journey of trying to ensure that our social lives reflect the success of our professional lives. If I haven't met you before, my name is Tosin and I'm a designer and academic. I wanted to start this video with a personal story that really set the groundwork for how I began to think about this topic and revealed to me a lot about how other people work sometimes and how the brains of my peers in this age and stage of life operate. This all started when I first moved to Boston. If you know anything about me, you know that I moved here for school. I got accepted into Harvard University, and so I packed my bags all the way from Canada and I relocated to Boston, Massachusetts. Well, actually Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is a city just outside of Boston, but they kind of feel like one big thing when you're here. So I moved here, and one of the first things that I did is I tried to find a really good church. For me, church is a big part of my life. It's where I find my community. Of course, there's friends to be made in school, but when I find friends in church, there's that common ground of belief and faith that unites us. And my relationship with Christ is such a big part of my life. And so that was one of my first focuses. When I was searching for these churches, one of my non-negotiables was community. The church I had just come from in Vancouver, that was its biggest strength. The sermons were good, the worship was good, but there was nothing that could beat the deep friendships and deep relationships that were in that church, and I was looking for something similar. Now, in hindsight, there's no way that I could have fully recreated my life in Canada now in Boston, but I was trying to bring with me all the good, and I was trying to start fresh with the things that were not so good. But either way, I came in and I found a local church, and I came in with this mindset like, I'm here to make friends. And I promise, even if you're not a church-going person, that this story will still be maybe relatable and still helpful to you. And if you are a church-going person, it's gonna hit all that much harder because maybe you've been in a similar situation. So I came to this church and I was determined to make friends. I did all of the right things. I joined a team and I was serving as much as I could, as much as I'd be scheduled. I actually joined multiple teams. I would stay awkwardly every single Sunday after church, waiting for someone to talk to me and trying to talk to other people as much as I could without seeming like desperate or creepy. And these things were very difficult for me because I am an introvert. I am a pretty shy person in those types of scenarios. Like, if you put me around people that I know well and friends that I already have, I can be super loud and outgoing. But when I'm in a room full of strangers, if I don't really feel comfortable, it's a whole different story, and I find it very difficult to open up or to put myself out there to go up to people. And so in a setting like a brand new church where everybody knows each other and everybody's really close friends, I'm not usually the type to just be able to go up to any group and be like, hey, like, how's it going? And so there was a lot of putting myself in uncomfortable situations. I would have an instinct where I'd want to run out right after the service ended, but I'd be like, no, Tosin, stay. Like, even if no one talks to you for a while and you just have to kind of stand in the corner twiddling your thumbs, it'll be worth it. Just stay past the awkwardness. Wait until someone comes up to you, or wait until you spot somebody who looks like they might have time to talk. Go to the connection table, all those things. I was just trying to expose myself to these people as much as humanly possible. After months and months and months of these attempts, I ended up in a place where it was like, I think almost everybody in that church probably knew who I was and knew my name. A lot of them I followed on social media and they followed me back. And, you know, there was small talk to be had, but yet still, Every Sunday I came, I would sit alone. No one would ever come up to me unless I went up to someone else. I would go to these prayer nights and things like that, and it would always be awkward. And, you know, I would have to scratch and claw my way to like finding someone to talk to. And that feeling of discomfort just never quite went away. And this went on for about a year. I would say maybe just under a year, about 10 months. And that's not a crazy amount of time, but in my experience, that was a pretty long time to be so engaged in a church and still not feel like you had any friends or community there and still feel excluded all the time. And so finally, I came to a point of starting to consider leaving churches, and there was some other shifts that were going on in my life, and so it was a good time. And I had met some friends at school who happened to be Christians as well, who also knew churches in the area, and so there was other ones for me to be able to try out. As I was starting to consider leaving the church, I got a lot more honest with some of the people who I had reached this like friend acquaintance level with, and this is a word I use a lot, friend acquaintance, because I think that that's the area I sit with a lot of people where it's like we're a little bit more than acquaintances, but we're not quite what I would call friends. But I got pretty honest and I got pretty ruthless, and there was a scenario that I was in where I was on a pretty long drive with one of these women from this church that I had gone to. They had said like, hey, we haven't seen you as much in church and things like that, like, you know, what's going on? So I was like, you know, I've actually been checking out other churches. And the woman that I was driving with was like, oh, why? Like, what happened? And again, I don't know what came over me, but I was just like so honest. And I said, well, it's just because like I've been going to this church for almost a year now, and I feel so disconnected. Like I don't have friendship, like I don't have community here. And what she responded to me was absolutely shocking. Since that time, I've continued to struggle to make good friends, but this perspective completely changed the way that I look at it and has helped me come at this with like such a peace and such a sense of confidence. She said that, you know, usually when new people join a church, I'm actually one of the first people to welcome them in and say hi to them. Like, I'm a leader at this church, and this was the woman driving me who said this. She said, you know, I'm a leader at this church, and I usually see it as a responsibility for myself, and this is kind of my role here, is to invite people out to coffee and really get them plugged in. But when I saw you, I looked at your Instagram account, and I heard that like you were a Harvard student and you're this designer and you had this successful business, the studio that you're running. And I just thought to myself, like, there's no way that she has time for friends, or that she would want to be friends with someone like me. I remember first when she said that, I automatically thought, okay, well, what's wrong with me? Am I intimidating? Am I coming across as somebody who doesn't want friends? Was I not open enough at the beginning of when I came to this church that like, hey, I just moved here and like I need friends, no matter how cool or impressive my Instagram account and my resume might look? But then upon talking to some of the people in my life from Canada that I had left behind but I'm still in contact with, I had told them about this, and I was like, man, like I feel so bad. Like, what can I do differently? Like, do I need to like post in a different way, or do I carry myself in such a way that feels like really prideful or unapproachable or anything like that? But they kind of regrounded me and were like, Tosin, like, I don't think that this is so much of a problem with you as it is with other people. If somebody comes into a community, whether or not they have the most impressive Instagram account, whether or not they are the CEO of the biggest Fortune 100 business in the world, I don't even care if they're a celebrity. Everybody needs a friend. And I think that that was an error on their part, to just look at you from the outside and look at the facade of who you are and assume that you didn't need community from there. Of course, after that, like, I heard that conversation, I was like, oh, I hear you. Those people started to put a little bit more effort into getting to know me and things like that. But at that point, it was a little bit too far gone, and I actually ended up shifting churches. And that's not to say that all of my friendship problems went away when I shifted churches. If you've seen my more recent videos, then you know that I still struggle in some ways with like closeness and things like that, but it completely reoriented my mind, and it woke me up to the fact that I have reached a point in life, and I think that if you're watching this video, you probably have reached a point in life where your success and your accolades are going to start turning people off of being your friends. Not because they don't want anything to do with that, but because there is an element of being known and being prominent and, you know, just having, like, I guess for lack of a better term, like a personal brand and having a presence in your career and on social media or just like in your field or even in your community that will start having people believe that they know you when they've never had a conversation with you. And that's a pretty difficult pill to swallow. I think that as humanity, we need to do a better job of not alienating or othering successful people. I'm not saying that successful people need our pity or anything like that, but they also don't need us to completely excommunicate them to the sidelines of society under the assumption that they have everything that they've ever needed and that therefore they don't need friends and relationship anymore. We need to understand as accomplished and as successful people that this might be a deterrence sometimes to making friends. I see this conundrum as multi-layered. There's the layer that I just described and talked about where other people just kind of feel like they know you, and so they might be less willing to become friends with you, or they might judge you before actually talking to you or assume that you're someone you're not. There's another layer of being a really successful and accomplished person where it becomes a lot more difficult to trust people, to let people in, to open up. And I think that that's absolutely fair, but it really can hold us back and deter us. I am so much more of a guarded person now than I was before. And I would still say that I'm pretty open and vulnerable, hence this YouTube channel. But before, I used to tell almost anyone anything. And I'm not saying that that's the correct way to be. I think that there's problems with that. But there was a certain freedom to just being absolutely open with everyone. I made a lot of fast friends that way because vulnerability is a really quick way to connect deeply with somebody. But as I've gotten older and more successful simultaneously, I kind of have my zones and I have my areas that I'm willing to share about. But when it comes to some things like maybe family or romantic relationships, I have pretty strong boundaries up there. But the thing is, when you make a good friend, those boundaries do need to start to come down a little bit. And if you really want to reach a level of closeness with somebody, you have to come to a place of trusting them with all of you and being able to share all of you with people. I know for me, that's something I really have struggled with because there's always that nagging fear in the back of my mind where I'm like, okay, like I see where I'm headed, I feel the trajectory of my life, and the things that I aspire to, the things that I pray for, and the things that I believe that I'm going to be blessed with may put me on a platform, may put me on a pedestal where I'm going to want to be really sure about the people who know me deeply. And I would hate to be in a position where people have all this information about me that I would not want to be shared widely, but it could be that it's in their best interest to share it. And we see this all the time where, you know, people will rise to prominence and then all of these ex-boyfriends and ex-friends and ex-people in their lives will come out of the woodwork and start sharing all this information about them that shouldn't be shared because they were trusted people at that point in time. And so there's this element of fear that I think comes as well, where you're just thinking like, I just want to be careful who I share these things with. And I also just want to make sure that, you know, people aren't being friends with me for the wrong reasons or for weird reasons and things like that. And I can only imagine that problem growing more and more as you become more and more successful. So I wanted to share with you some of the mindset shifts and strategies that I've been using to overcome this hurdle. And because this is something that has a little bit less to do with us as individuals, the most that we can do with it is change how we react and how we see things. And it's not really about, you know, finding ways of forcing friendships that are not meant to be. And so what I mean by this is that when I approach social situations, I usually, first of all, really search for people who feel really secure in where they are in life. This usually results in me growing deeper friendships with people who are just as accomplished as me, if not more, in their own right. So this isn't necessarily about finding somebody with more money in their bank account than what you have, or finding someone who's more conventionally attractive than you, but it's more about an internal knowing that you are exactly where you're meant to be in life. And I found the most success in building deep relationships with people who have that attribute. And so this is a question of the circles you run in and the people that you surround yourself by. Where are you looking for friends? Are you looking in places where you're going to find people who care a lot about themselves and are putting in action towards their goals? Or are you just stumbling into friendship in places where you might be finding all sorts of people? If nothing else, I hope that this video is an affirmation that you're not crazy. You're not unlovable. We need friendship. No matter what phase in life you're in, no matter how busy you are, I think having a good community by your side is absolutely essential. So don't give up yet. And if people react to you in adverse ways, release those people into the world. Maybe they're not the right people for you, and keep it moving and keep seeking out those genuine connections. I hope that this video was comforting and encouraging. I would love it if you would comment your thoughts down below so that we can have a conversation. And I'd also love if you would come and join our little corner of the internet by subscribing or just continuing to come back and watch and engage with these videos. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you very soon. Bye.